Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Gainsight's Chief Strategist of Pulse Programs, Ruben Rabago.
All right. This is like the most difficult session. We have to combat the post-lunch coma syndrome. So no sleeping. This is not nap time. We're going to have a really engaging session today. And you'll be part of that. So please make sure that you tee up any questions throughout the session with Slido, slido.com, or go to the app. This room is Coachella. On the theme of career success, CSM career success, we have an often heatedly debated topic coming up, and that is how technical should CSMs be. So with that, I'd like to introduce and bring to the crowd, and please help me welcome Lane Holt, who is a technical CSM herself. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Hi. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be with you today. This is a great topic that many people are very passionate about. So before we go any further, let's introduce the two guests that will be joining me today. Today I have Pallavi Gattapalli, who is the Director of Customer Experience at Druva, the industry's fastest growing born-in-the-cloud data protection provider. She has a proven track record of building very technical CSM teams. She has worked with organizations such as eBay, Cisco, Yahoo, and Microsoft, to name a few. Please help me in welcoming Pallavi to the stage.
Hi.
Hey, Pallavi.
Hi.
So one of our values here at Gainsight is childlike joy. So if you could help me by telling me a little bit of what brings you joy.
Without question, I think it's hugging my son every day. He's still in the lovey-dovey phase. He's turned 11. But it's real fun to hug him every day and squeeze his cheeks a little.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks, Pallavi. So we are also joined by Will Crocker, the Senior Director of Customer Success at Braze, formerly AppBoy. Braze is a marketing automation platform which works with brands such as Domino's, ABC News, Microsoft, and Lyft, to name a few. Will was a founding member of their customer success team at Braze, which has grown from 2 members to now over 40 members worldwide. Please help me in welcoming Will to the stage. All right, Will, same question for you. Please help us understand what brings some childlike joy into your life.
Ooh, I'd have to say skiing. I think just the feeling of like flying down a mountain at 40 miles an hour, that's a lot of fun and hard to replicate in your day-to-day out there.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and have a seat and get this conversation going. All right, Pallavi, so the first question today is for you. Why should a CSM be technical?
The answer is clear. And I think it's about human behavior, really, right? How do humans really learn? They usually learn from their own failure or from other people's failures, right? Mm-hmm. So the best lessons come from failure. So if you can move ahead, I'd like to. So we had something that was set up already in my previous life. We said, OK, we are going to roll this out to customers, and we are going to give this to customers. This is what we think customers will receive. But what they ended up receiving was something that looked like the right. We said, we're giving you this amazing house, and they got a shack, basically. And there was a time when they wouldn't take our call either, right? They said, please don't get a salesperson in the room, and please do not get a non-technical person in the room. So what we did was we actually went back to the drawing board, which we should have done in the first place. We went and talked to customers. We went and via surveys. We went and talked to our professional services organization. And we went and talked to our salespeople. And we decided that what we found was something that you see kind of on the right. There were a lot of missteps, missed opportunities. And what we wanted to drive was something on the left, right? Which is what we wanted to do. So that's the reason why we said technical, technical, technical. That's what our customers need, and that's what we want to drive forth.
Awesome. So, Will, I know that you fall on the opposite side of this debate. So help us better understand why you believe a CSM should be less technical.
I think there are a lot of reasons. And, first of all, starting off, I want to say these guys here, guys banging on the computer in Zoolander, trying to say the files in the computer, I'm not saying you have to be that non-technical. We need people who are literate about the product, understand what you can do, understand what's possible, understand why it's important for your customers. But at the same time, I just don't think that you need to be mired in every technicality of exactly how you implement every piece of your technology, because I think it can detract from the larger conversation you're trying to have in a lot of ways. When you think about what a customer success manager is supposed to be focusing on, if you think about their core responsibilities, in my tenure at Braze, is something we've seen evolve quite a bit, and it really kind of boils down to something I think pretty simple. You're trying to demonstrate value. You're trying to help customers understand every day what are they actually getting out of your software and what more should they be getting if you look strategically down the line. How should they be continuing to adopt new things? They're trying to drive advocacy. You're trying to drive adoption to have them get more out of it every single day. And then, of course, you're going to run into those situations where customers run into roadblocks and you need to be the voice of that customer with your product team. Or you might be running into situations where customers are saying everything is wonderful and you need to be the voice of that customer for figuring out how you can amplify their message in the marketplace and help make them a bigger part of your brand conversation. And then ultimately, of course, it comes down to ensuring renewal. But I think none of these things necessarily drill down into always being technical. In fact, a couple of times I've seen across my tenure that as we've grown, we've had some really technical customer success managers in the past, and I think at a certain stage in our company evolution, that was really important. I'm sure many of you out there, if you're at organizations where you have just a couple of customer success people, you're kind of the glue that serves everything in between, sales and product and marketing, or even sometimes marketing too. You might be doing everything else in between, and you're helping pull together pieces for a product that, might not be fully fledged and enterprise ready. But as you grow, as you mature, it's something that if you have a customer success manager who always is mired in conversations around exactly how to implement something or trying to troubleshoot something that's not going well, all of a sudden, that's all the customer wants to talk to you about. Or conversely, there's times when even if you're ready to talk about those things, we have certain customers that we can have customer success managers who are technical, who will have the right answer to their questions and have the right strategy for them, but because of their title, they don't even want to talk to them. They just want to say, I want to hear an engineer tell me this. I want to hear your director of product tell me this. And so I think specializing those customer success managers around having that strategic conversation of where it should go, that's something that is best left for people who are a little bit less technical in the long term.
That makes sense. But one of the things that we have to take into consideration is that if a CSM is less technical or more technical, we have to make some considerations in that life cycle. So, Pallavi, from your perspective, when we take a very technical approach to customer success management, what considerations do you have to make throughout this process?
So I want to restart again with what we discovered in our journey, right, in our customer success kind of journey within the company. So we looked outside in, right? It's really what your customers want. It's very Nick speak. Actually, Nick says that a lot, which is, how can you provide value to the customer? And what we found is customer needed technical knowledge, and that goes for a lot of industries, right? So security, DevOps, IoT platforms, data backup, the industry that I'm in today. A lot of times, customers just need technical expertise, and you have to understand that when they need technical expertise, you need to look inwards. You need to look inwards on, okay, what can I do now to fix it today, and what do I need to plan for the future? So the way we executed that plan was we looked inwards. We said, what technical resources do we have inside our company, right? Is it a stellar services team? Is it a stellar reactive support team? Is it the TME team? Is it the SCs? Is it amazing documentation team, right? So in my past life, the services team is stellar, right? So I decided, okay, we're going to focus on services, and we're going to figure out how to create a jumpstart program or a pilot, right? But that also means that you need to create a plan for the future. And my vision, actually, and please excuse me, my vision is very Black Mirror. People who have not watched Black Mirror, you must watch it. It's wonderful. So in that, it's like the man-machine division isn't there anymore, right? Like you're thinking it, and your product is performing the way you're thinking. We are going to get there, right? But the first step is really to bring everything online and then integrate it within the product, which is what my charter is today in my data backup and recovery, role. So plan for the future, but do something now, because usually CSM teams come into the picture when there's a problem, right? And it's not a good or a bad thing. It just is. You're supposed to fix something. So look inwards, find out what works now, and then plan for the future. So this is how I see it happening: tech automation, ML, and then actually build within.
So ML is machine learning.
Machine learning, I'm sorry, I should say that. Machine learning, I'm not calling it deep learning yet. Please note that. I think the first step is just simply machine learning and bringing it into the product. That's my vision.
Okay. And Will, kind of from your perspective, if you take a less technical route, what considerations do you have to make in the customer journey there?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. First of all, in that journey, I think if I'm talking about a lot of the things that Pallavi is talking about in terms of like getting the product in the right place, getting it set up for customers, answering their technical questions, I think in a lot of cases, what is important to recognize there is that you're not necessarily doing what I would say core customer success work. Customer success work, if you're thinking about providing value, if you're thinking about getting at those key questions of what's going to get them to renew 6 months down the line and make sure they're actually, not getting mired into what's happening today and tomorrow, but looking at the long term, you need to be thinking about what you can do to have them have that long-term conversation. And the trade-offs really are that as you start to hire really technical customer success managers, you are ultimately going to find people who don't have the time to actually focus on those strategic questions. You're not going to find people who have that similar level of expertise in both areas. I think really early in Braze's tenure, it's something that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we were trying to hire jack of all trades who are pretty technical, pretty pretty strategic as well. But at the same time, what we found was we couldn't continually reliably hire those sort of people. We were sort of hunting for technical marketing unicorns that barely existed in the market. I'm sure that sometimes in some of your pursuits of new CSMs, you feel like the same way, that you're hunting for a talent pool that's extremely stretched and it's not there. And so it's something that we've seen that we've had to do a lot of specialization over time. I mean, if you look at here, this is sort of like as you are my model for organizational evolution. As you grow as a company, as you continue to make a more sophisticated product, you're also going to have more sophisticated customers who have more sophisticated business models. You might be dealing with more business units of these customers and have more discrete stakeholders who want to use your product in different ways. For us, some people want to send messages. Some people want to understand how those customer insights should drive advertisements and other products. There's a lot of touch points that we have to deal with at a Microsoft or a Lyft or any of our large other clients. And if we have that kind of customer market sophistication, that's going to drive more product specialization and sophistication. And that means that we need to specialize. We need to have onboarding and integration teams. Okay. We need to have people that are focused on technical support and have a scalable technical support model. To your point, we need online communities. We need to make sure that we have scalable resources that people can access in a self-service way. But without that focus into those other roles, whether it be solutions architecture or customer support or even just an onboarding team that I'm talking about, I don't think CSMs can really do their job.
So how does the CSM team then complement that? If CSM isn't as technical and you need that aspect in onboarding, do we wait until they're out of onboarding to introduce the CSM, or where does the CSM come into play then?
I think the CSM actually, in our model, actually does come in right in the middle of onboarding. We sort of, after they get through the first few weeks, our onboarding cycles last anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks. And usually about the halfway point, depending on the complexity of onboarding, we bring them in and they start to have that conversation understanding, what are your goals? What are you trying to implement? What are you trying to look at, not just to kind of get up your MVP out the door, which is usually what you have at the end of onboarding. But what do you really want to do 6 months down the line, a year down the line? What are you looking to do in 2019? And when we bring them in to have that conversation, sometimes it helps act as another viewpoint on how we should be reshaping the onboarding and reshaping that conversation. And then I think they're also working on organizational mapping, working on account stakeholder relationships. It really dovetails nicely, if you were at the last session, from a lot of the sort of executive business review concepts that we were talking about, trying to up-level the conversation and make it more strategic. And that's key, because ultimately, if you don't have executives of these companies who are invested in your success and invested in what you're providing, ultimately you become a line item to cut at the end of the quarter when they rebudget.
So one of the things that we did change was when every time we tried to insert a customer success manager in the whole cycle, it kept coming back that they wanted more technical skill set, right? So it was about trying and figuring out what doesn't work and it didn't work for us, and then go back and say, okay, what do we need in addition to that? And you rightfully said, project management was a huge issue, right? Like having their resources aligned, having their resources in place to help them onboard, so they are also as invested in us. So we do have a project manager on our pilot, but it's mostly technical resources who are doing it, because the reason is, anyway, who knows what the symbol is? Anyone in the audience?
Circle.
Good one.
Yes.
It's the Buddhist symbol for a never-ending journey.
Huh.
So what we found was our journey obviously is never ending. The customer journey is never ending. Every time there's a new feature set, right? Every time there is a new upsell or cross-sell of a product, we have a unique architecture that it integrates with, and it's always technical. If any, there are slivers of stuff that are less technical. What we found is most of our journey, every little minute piece in the journey is technical. And that's the reason why we chose to do what we did. And even in this industry, in data backup industry, we have found the same thing. We've had jumpstart programs, we've had ongoing service attachments, because that's what has brought us success.
So a question for each of you, and we'll start, Will, with you. When the CSM is less technical and they're coming in early on in the onboarding, where does the renewal, is it owned? Does the CSM own the renewal in your model? And then Pallavi, to you afterwards, is who owns that renewal? Does the CSM or does the sales team?
Ultimately, in our model, it's co-owned between the CSM and what we call account managers, who are just, they're kind of what we would call just install-based account executives. They're there to have commercial conversations with all of our customers and to help with those kind of contract renewals. So they're owning renewals. But ultimately, like CSMs, we're holding them accountable to renewal rates, net renewal rates. We're using the same kind of model that actually Gainsight uses in having success qualified leads and success qualified upsells to make sure that we're driving the right kind of outcomes for our business. And ultimately, we have adoption and advocacy measures for the, to make customer metrics out there too. So
I feel real strongly about this one. No. So the comp models have to change. I agree with that. CSMs shouldn't be responsible for renewals or compensation in that way. Sales should be, especially for really large organizations. It's really hard to change that mindset and culture where sales actually loses on some of the money that they're making today, right? It's a hard conversation. Also, I've heard it from customers directly, do not get a sales pitch into the room. So I don't think that's going to work. At least in my industry, it does not work.
It's great to understand that. So as we kind of move on to this next question here, sometimes you have very technical end users, and so they understand the APIs, they want to make sure that they're working well, and they need that technical aspect to it. So in your perspective, does it change when the end user's technical acumen changes?
So my answer is it depends. And the reason why I say it is because, okay, so coming back to the industry, right? Data backup, security. Most of our users are IT admins, network operations, or security operations people, right? They're already geeks. They know what they're doing. They are good at what they do. But we have to understand that there's a serious lack of security talent. It's 200% lack of security talent in the industry. So if we have to make the customer look good for their QBR, we have to fill in that technical gap, right? There isn't anyone who's doing that. We have to take the time to learn and fill in that technical gap. So it's really important for us to fill in that gap for them, because even though they're good, they can't be excellent and they cannot know all products. They typically have a suite of products in their IT environment, right? So that's why.
Okay. And Will, kind of what's your perspective on this?
My answer is absolutely. It absolutely changes based on the end user. And it changes based upon your product too, right?
Okay.
I think Braze is a fairly technical product. We have a technical integration, but then we're working with marketers to help them create, fairly complex marketing campaigns. That in and of itself, that's something where we need to have people that can speak the language of the developers that are actually integrating that product and make sure they're able to have a conversation where the developers don't want to even let them in the door, but at the same time, they need to be able to translate and talk to all the stakeholders of these organizations and talk to marketing teams and talk to all these different folks and be able to have a dialogue where they can actually establish a relationship and a shared respect for these organizations. And I really think that's what it all comes down to. You can be, a standard deviation away in technicality from your end user, but you can't be so far that they feel like they're not even having a conversation with you. And so that matters a lot. So I think so.
Awesome. Awesome. So the big question that I think everyone in this room, at least I hope everyone in this room is thinking, is how do we make this scale? So how do we make a very technical CSM scale? Because we know that if you have to have this deep technical understanding, that there's some trade-off that you're making instead. And so you can't necessarily find 100 very technical CSMs to do a very one-to-few approach where you have one CSM to 5 or 6 accounts, because we don't have those unicorns. So Pallavi, how do we make technical success work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the way we did it, and this is how I plan to do it going forward in the future, is we really launched, remember I told you we launched a pilot program where we followed strategic accounts. And we decided we are going to map the journey individually into really minute pieces of that journey, right? There's a journey, there's a high-level journey. I've only shown you what we have so far. But there are these mini chevrons within that journey that align with every single piece of digital content that you create, right? That actually led to an online experience that we launched in my previous life, right? And that online experience kind of looks like this. So if you click on installation configuration guide, as you see here, you'll see something like a step 1, step 2, step 3. This is just one piece, right? It's an online journey, right? That's all it is. It's an online journey where content is aligned with the journey. Now, this is just the first step to scale, right? The second step to scale really is bringing it back into support and product, like tying it all together, which is what is the next phase for me, and that's what I'm doing.
So if you want to, Will, from your perspective then, non-technical has to scale too. And you made a mention earlier of this unicorn.
Yeah.
So we have a technical unicorn that's also really good at driving that strategic conversation. And we know that those can be very few and far between. And so what's that trade-off, and how do you make that non-technical or less technical scale?
I think actually in some ways, it's a lot of what Pallavi just said. Think about building a robust online community, having awesome documentation, having awesome resources that people can use to understand, like a lot of learning management software out there. We're implementing courseware to help people understand how to apply best practices from across verticals to their business and use our software better. All that stuff comes in, but I just don't think that that's necessarily the CSM delivering every piece of that. It's also something that I think as you're hiring these people, one other thing I'd mention as you scale is it's really important to think about as you grow your team what their job satisfaction is too. Something we've found as well is that even if we have people that are find some of these unicorns who can be really technical and engage at that level and also have the strategic conversation, it often turns out that people want to gravitate towards one thing or the other. And if you have someone where you're trying to force them into these technical conversations over and over again that they can have, but maybe they just don't enjoy, your job satisfaction is going to go down. And similarly, if you have somebody that's really technical in a CSM role, all of a sudden you're going to find out that you're losing people to your product organization constantly, which is fine. I mean, I support a lot of cross-pollination in organizations, and I think you all should, that you should not be afraid of your really great people going to other departments in your company. But at the same time, it does make it easier if people really want to work for your department for the long haul too. So finding a way and finding that mix where they feel satisfied in what they're doing and driving the conversations they want to have is helpful too.
It's a really good point. I do want to drive that a little bit further, which is it's about the mindset, right? So when you're actually hiring into your customer success team, it's actually a mindset of learning and setting expectations that this just won't be just a business conversation. You have to be open to learning it technically if that's the product line you want to choose to stay in. If you don't want to choose to stay in that, you could try other product lines that don't require that technical of knowledge, right? So it's about setting the expectations when you actually hire into your CSM team. And we made a mistake, and we are now trending to fixing it.
So from a technical perspective, when you are looking to hire from your team, are you finding that you need to look internally more to find someone who can come up to speed quickly on the technical aspects of your product versus someone from outside who might not be as technical on data management and protection and things and IoT and things like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So our technical management team, the TAMs, as well as PS and support, all of them are extremely technical. I wouldn't say they've not come from outside, but they've come from that subject matter. So they're ex-Veritas, Code 42, stuff like that. So they're from other companies that have that kind of background. That being said, I have no data backup or recovery background, right? So I was hired because of potential. I was hired because the expectations were set that I need to get on board quickly, and I have. I've already taken the training. I've dog-fooded it. I know it. So it's about setting expectations. That's why I just want to drive that point.
Will, when you're looking at other organizations that are taking a less technical approach to their CSMs, what is the one biggest pitfall that you find they make?
That's a tough one.
Good one.
I think that the biggest pitfall that you make is just finding people that, if you're looking at a non-technical person, it's easy to have someone who has all the business acumen in the world and can have that strategic conversation, they can do organizational account mapping, they can work with complex enterprises. But if they don't give a damn about your product, if they really don't have a genuine curiosity about the technology and want to learn more, they're never going to help your customers understand how to use your product, or what you can, rather not even how to use it, but what you can do with your product and why you should do it at a level of a CSM who has genuine curiosity about your product and is driven to the purpose and the mission of what you want to do. I think if you kind of just, are purely kind of focusing on career salespeople who want to make a pivot into a new organization, sometimes I've seen instances where that's happened. Not so much at Braze, but other companies. I've heard of that happening from colleagues in New York. So it's a risk that if you don't find people who are really driven and interested in your technology, they might not even be able to get to the what or the why, let alone the how. So.
And besides, if you really want to drive up value with your customer, and you want to get to that renewals conversation, they have to respect your opinion. If you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't know your product deeply, they're not going to respect your opinion. You're never going to get to that conversation, right? You're only going to be in the beginning, okay, here's the value, here's the value, here's the value, and they're not listening. They're not hearing you.
So Pallavi, when you talk to people who are saying that they're going to take a very technical approach to their CSM and the way that they're managing their customers, what's the biggest pitfall that they make?
Yeah, that's a hard one. So I think to Will's point, the biggest pitfall is not being able to come up a little bit at the level and say, what's going to make you look good to your management? It's a very simple thing. It's a management strategy, actually. How can I make my manager look better, or how can I make my customer look better? And I think sometimes people take a very minute view of what they're helping the customer out with, and they don't necessarily pull them out and say, okay, is it going to help them in their QBR? Is it going to help them get to where they want to get to? And the value doesn't necessarily have to be a business outcome. The value has to be the experience.
Okay. All right. So just a reminder to everyone out here, if you guys do have questions, please add them into the Slido so that as we come up on that portion, we will have them ready to go and we can quickly pull them up and answer them. So Pallavi, what's the one thing that Will hasn't kind of said against the technical CSM approach that you would say would be the biggest argument against it?
Let's see. He said he always had to look for unicorns. I kind of differ a little bit, maybe because I live in the Bay Area and the kind of people that I interact with is maybe mostly technical, and I have seen them like really draw themselves out and actually see the business perspective. So I feel like if you know your product well, you can be trained to look at the business perspective. That's just how I feel.
Maybe they exist. They're just really expensive.
That's just how I feel.
They're
And
really
yes,
expensive and only
you
live in
pay
the
for
Bay
skill
Area.
set.
Yeah.
You pay for skill set.
Yeah.
So, Will, what's the one thing Pallavi hasn't kind of said against the non-technical side?
I think that sometimes what happens is as you scale, it's customers really do want somebody who can come in and just discreetly solve their problem. And I think sometimes if you don't set up the important support networks for a non-technical CSM to be able to quickly solve those issues and make sure that they're getting the appropriate support from a solutions consultant or from a support team or from an onboarding team, then they can't get to those strategic conversations anyway. So if you don't have that support network ready, then you might need a more jack of all trades CSM who can kind of just dig in and solve it themselves.
Okay.
10 points.
Thank
10
you.
points to Will. All right. So one of the things that I've seen sometimes when we have, because we do have some more technical CSMs here at Gainsight, is sometimes the end customer wants to have them help them configure things, and then they never get to come out of that role of the person that, the confidant that they go to and say, hey, I need this built out, how do I do this? And then the CSM does it. So how do you combat that in a technical approach of making sure you're not their support? You're not their person that they go to when they need something configured.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and that's the reason why we have services attached, so they get continuous support when they need it, right? It's paid, and it's service attachment. So if they don't have a service attachment or they don't have a technical CSM, the online journey is the only way to go. The online digital experience is the only way to go, and that's why it needs to be on point. You need to have your chat, you need to have your email, you need to have your support embedded in that. There's no other option.
Okay. So one of the questions I have for you, Will, and then again for you, Pallavi, is for you in the less technical world, what's your CSM to customer ratio?
Ooh, so CSM customer ratio, we kind of stratify and divide up our customers by a few different tiers depending on their account size and the kind of like also growth potential as well. We don't do it just on like their current spend, but also their future potential spend. But essentially we have customers that higher tiers of customers, we kind of allot somewhere between like 10 to 15 accounts per CSM or something like that, and sometimes as high as 20 on the very high end. But then we also have sort of a lower touch model that we have where we have CSMs in sort of our mid-market that might have 40 or 50 accounts or something like that.
Okay, and then Pallavi, for you, I'm kind of thinking that you probably have a smaller ratio as well.
We do. So our services attached or pilot jumpstart program, I think it's 1:8, I think, because it's high touch, and then it quickly transitions into semi-tech touch, which is I think 1:25. I don't exactly know what it is now because it's previous life, and in this life it's also very similar. Everyone else goes mid-market and low end goes to online, and the high touch is 1:8 or 1:10, something like that.
I'll also add to that, like we also have, for a few select clients, we do have a couple of CSMs that are working on functioning a strategic role where they only have like just 3 or 4 accounts. But those are a lot of those accounts that are really large enterprise companies that, we might work with 5 business units out of the company, but we know that there's 30 more underneath, and they're spending their entire, life strategizing in these companies.
Okay. That makes sense. So let's go to the quick takeaways. If we want to,
sure.
You have the clicker there, Will. So Will, for a less technical role, what's something that you want to make sure that those who came in here walk away understanding?
I think it's just really important to understand these 4 things of demonstrating value, driving adoption, ensuring renewal, being the voice of the customer. All these things are ultimately, unless your product just doesn't work and you can't get it integrated, they're not going to boil down to the technical minutia of what they're doing with their product. It's going to boil down to the value of what they're getting out of it. And sometimes you need to make sure that even if that value is apparent in your product, you need to make sure every skeptic in an organization is known, and you need to make sure that they all understand loud and clear what you're able to do for them, what you're driving through their business. I think ultimately those are things that rely on account mapping, account strategy. It's understanding the organization and the stakeholders that you have. It's understanding what they're actually doing with their product, and more importantly, why they're doing it, what KPIs are affecting. And I think if you get stuck in a conversation where every single conversation you have comes down to, hey, when's this new product feature that we asked you about coming out? Is that coming out next week or the week after? And that's all they want to talk about. Or I have this support issue, and I can't get this thing going online the way I want it to. All of a sudden, you might want to have these strategic conversations, and because you're the person that's taken ownership of some of the other technical details, they sweep that aside and say, no, talk to me about what I want, rather than you coming forward to them proactively and saying, I have things to offer about the long term, about what really can provide value.
So Pallavi, for you.
OK. So I don't know if Ken is here. I wanted to give a huge shout out to Ken. My first takeaway is how scales. So the 2080, and that's right, I said 2080, is the top 20 accounts that give you 80% of your revenue. Document everything that you did with them to get them to success. If you document that and you translate that plan across the board, you're going to get, one, fingers on the keyboard quickly, which is what everybody needs for product deployment. And second, you would know what levels of delight actually mean. When you see how scales, you can define your levels of delight. So Brian Chesky, I don't know if anyone has heard the Masters of Scale program, Reid Hoffman. He has these 13 levels of delight for Airbnb. I love that show. I've listened to it 20 times over. Must listen. So that actually tells you how to define your levels of delight. That's one. And my second takeaway, the journey map is everything. I'll say it again. The journey map is everything. This will lead you to rethink the value that you give back to your customer, right? Knowing that journey deeply will tell you what the customer needs and how can you insert your value in that. And it'll also tell you what the practical delivery of the people, process, and technology needs to look like, right? It's going to tell you exactly what you need to do to align with that journey and to deliver that the kind of investment that you need to make in your people, process, and technology.
Okay. All right. Well, we do have some questions in the Slido, so let's jump on over to there. So Will, what are your thoughts on having a technical overlay role within CS that works with the CSMs?
Absolutely. We call them solutions architects. They sit primarily within our onboarding team, because oftentimes that's when the most technical parts of our product conversation are actually happening with our customers. But there's something that can be used as an escalation point by our CSMs at any account tier, that if they need to have a difficult technical conversation, or they're having that conversation and they're telling the customer what they need to know, and they say, I don't want to talk to an engineer, they're the people that we bring in, because they do have a much more technical focus, and they're able to talk to it at a deeper level. So that's like one of the specializations that we brought in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that even in our situation, we have TAMs, the technical account managers, who do that. So that's definitely key for our success.
Awesome. How do you easily convey the difference between customer support and customer success in an organization with technical CSMs, Pallavi?
We use support and services as our attached services model. So it's actually completely intertwined. So based on what the customer success managers provide, we have a direct correlation of reduction in support cases of certain kinds, which is configuration, basic questions, and licensing. So they actually feed into each other's KPIs and metrics, and they feed into each other's QBRs, actually. So if one is successful, the other is, and vice versa. So it's a really great way to bring everyone on board with customer success.
Can you explain a little bit more about that attached services model? You've mentioned it a couple times.
Yeah, so we have professional services that go with all strategic accounts. You sell services with the product. It's a requirement. In addition, the support team that is actually kind of in line with the support organization, which is in line with the professional services people, they are tracking that if they don't use professional services, if customers don't use professional services and they use either online experience or something else, there is still a reduction of support cases. And with PS, the support cases, you are actually not going to see any support cases that are config related or licensing related or initial basic questions related. Like unboxing and stuff, you don't see it at all. So we actually track it pretty closely, and we also see where the customer is at in their life cycle, right? If they just bought the product, yeah, you might see a little spike, but 10 days down the line, they shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Will, the next question is for you. This person says they totally agree that a CSM needs to have a certain level of technical proficiency. But what do you think about the dedicated success engineering team to support the CSMs?
I love that. I love that.
I mean,
I'll think about it.
I think it depends on your product. I would hope that, I think the most scalable products out there, you're not going to want something where you need an engineering team to implement every single, like an engineering team in your own company implement everything. Because then you're not really going to scale as a product company, you're going to scale as a services organization, and your ROI on that's going to slip quite a bit. But at the same time, like, I think having technical assets and technical resources within your team for escalation points, like the solutions architect, like the idea of, we used to call them technical success managers. I think some places call them technical account managers. It's all verbiage that kind of centers around the same thing. That's a great idea, and it's something that's important. And also, of course, having a close relationship with your support team is also important.
Of course, of course. Do you think that the complexity of the product makes a difference? Will, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but not to a full extent.
Yes, 100%. I think if you have a really simple product that has like a plug-and-play style integration, then your need for technical resources is going to be much, much lower versus like our product, which has a lot of options and a lot of ways that you can integrate it, or I imagine security products like you've worked on and things like that.
So I come
a lot
from
of levers.
sorry to cut you off, Will, but I come from a very enterprise-focused background. I've been an enterprise product manager, and I recently transitioned to doing customer success. So I used to think that actually that easier products may not need technical people, but to be honest with you, in today's space, and our product is cloud-based data backup and recovery, I just dog-fooded it, right, 4 weeks into it. It's extremely simple. It really is simple. Like, maybe because I'm technical and I was a product manager, it seems that way, but it's way simpler than what I'm used to before. But even so, I think it's, again, looking outside in, it's your customers don't have the skill set. You have to do it for them. Yeah, even if it's really simple, they'll install it and then they'll actually forget about it, so upsells are harder.
Okay. So Will, you mentioned earlier for customers who have a bigger potential of wallet with you, they have a smaller amount of, the CSMs have a smaller ratio of customers, and that, does it also change with the technical piece of the product? So if the product is more technical and the customer has a bigger share of wallet with you, do you provide them more technical and strategic resources, maybe 2 instead of 1?
Yeah, I think the way it scales for us, I mean, our product is our product. It's just about how technically you want to implement it. But we definitely have customers that want to customize the hell out of it, do a lot of different things with it that are not necessarily, out of the box functionality, and we want to support that. We think that's exciting. We think that's great. And when that happens, like oftentimes, those are deeper strategic conversations about the what and the why than might happen in some other customers. And so, yeah, that certainly affects like account load. I think it affects how often you have to communicate with those customers, and definitely it kind of reduces the number they can take.
Right, Pallavi, this question is for you. How do you keep your CSMs from being glorified customer care, being the person the customer goes to for all the product questions?
They're paying for it. They can ask any question they want.
Oh.
So that's my take on it. So if you have attached services with your product, you're paying for it. You can ask any question.
As somebody, when we started out with a very technical CSM team at Braze with originally no support team, this one was really hard for us, and it's taken years to untangle. So
it's a hard question, but I'd say if they're really paying for it, they're allowed to ask it.
All right. Well, I do appreciate both of you joining me today, and I appreciate the time that you took. And thank you, everyone, for joining this session. So if we can give a round of applause for Will and Pallavi.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great job. Thanks, Will.
Yeah.
Good job.